Okay, I think we can start the podcast now. I'm joined by Philippe and Kalindi today. I'm super happy to have them with me. They are both really passionate about the subject we're going to discuss today, which is along the lines of with great power comes great responsibility, or in less Spider-Man terms, what power do we have as devs and what should be our responsibility with it? Kalindi, could you introduce yourself in 3 sentences or less?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So I guess most recently I've been dancing around AI for conservation. So that's my direction and main interest. And previously, I guess I've worked in ed tech and film and many other things. And I guess I also have a strong pull for adventure. And I'm happy to be here and talk about this topic.
I think it will be outside of the podcast, but I will ask you at some point about AI for conservation because it sounds super interesting. It will be a teaser for our next episode. You're in.
Nice.
Philippe, could you do the same, please?
Yes, of course. So my name is Philippe. I've been a Ruby developer for 10 years-ish, working mostly with startups. Then I stopped working in an agency and I joined NodalView, where I was lead dev, then manager, and today I'm CTO at NodalView, which is a small company of like 50 to 100 people helping real estate agents.
Cool.
Not so small.
Depends who you compare it to, I guess.
Yeah, we still are referred to as a small company.
Nice.
Even companies can have imposter syndrome, it seems. Okay, nice. Let's get into the middle of the subject immediately. Kalindi, what power do you think we have as software engineers? And is the present situation changing our power somewhat? Like the AI introduction, the fact that there is a rougher market, etc. Does it change it and how?
So I feel like we have massive. I always go around talking that we have responsibility and the privilege from the roles we have, like on the first line. Basically, we do earn more or a lot of money, which means that there's some more freedom in the way we spend our free time or breaks in the career, or even gives us the capacity to select certain types of jobs that maybe conventionally don't pay more, but because it's tech, it still pays quite a lot. And then I also think because we're at the forefront of changes, that even being in a conventional company, if you stick to some moral values of yourself, you can direct it in a good direction. So basically, both personally and within our jobs, I think we have a big responsibility. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think it's changing with the fact that the market is rougher, that AI has been introduced and it's going to replace us all between the quotation marks?
I don't want it to change. And I think it's always a matter of perception. Like, when do we take responsibility? And I feel like, of course, if one is scared or worried about one's well-being, but I was mentioning privilege. I think we're still very privileged despite all the changes in the market or socioeconomic changes in the world. Like, so I think it might be less easy or like less money raining, but I still think the responsibility is the same.
Makes sense in my head. Philippe, same questions. Take us away.
So yeah, I do think we have a lot of responsibilities. I will talk mostly as software engineers, which is like what I know best. I think for starters, we are trusted very early in our career with a lot of knowledge and a lot of data. Even as interns, even before we get a real job, we get access to full access to databases. We get like crazy responsibilities for that. So I think knowledge is the first responsibility we are given. And then, of course, building the software also has a lot of responsibilities, because sometimes it feels like we are perceived as shamans or priests or like voodoo, something like that. Like people don't want to understand how we do what we do. They want what we do, they want the result, but they don't want to know how we reach that, which leaves us with the responsibility of choosing exactly what we do because people won't guide us. So for me, those are two of the main responsibilities we have. I do agree that we also have a lot of privileges with which come a lot of responsibilities. A friend of mine defines privileges as like a handicap you don't have, which is a definition I love because it removes any need of being ashamed of any privileges. It's just a handicap you don't have, but you should be aware that you don't have that handicap and other people do have that handicap. So of course, I do agree that there's a lot of responsibilities coming from the fact that you don't have a lot of the handicaps that most people have, especially as a also like white cis man, like coming from having education in Belgium in like 2020. So like there's a chain of stuff coming. But for me, like whoever you are, whatever is your background, you will be trusted with data and you will be trusted with the responsibility of building something which is going to automate something with nobody overseeing what you've built. And that is a crazy high responsibility. For the second part of your question, I don't think AI is going to change a lot. I don't think like rough market, I graduated in 2008, like there was crisis and it feels like my whole career has been like crisis. It's crisis A, crisis B. So for me, it feels like a scam. There's always a problem and this is just an excuse for whatever someone wants to sell you. So yeah, currently AI is a threat or an opportunity. It is the same. And in 5 years, it's going to be something else. In 10 years, it's going to be something else. The tools are changing. That is something I believe in. So typically AI is a tool that we need to adopt. A lot of people need to adopt that tool, but it's not a threat. It's not deep change in the responsibilities as just a new tool, in my opinion.
Yeah, also it's us software engineers who build AI, so the responsibility comes there too, right? It's like what?
That's interesting.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Because thank you. Like the way people look at us, like, oh, please do the stuff. We don't want to know how you did it. Make it work. That's what we do with AI. Sometimes, like building a model, and we ask AI, like, please compute the correlation, and I don't want to know how you manage that, but please make it work. So it feels like roles have changed a little bit.
Sure. I'm gonna come back to a feeling I'm getting, which is that you both are saying that there is a lot of power and responsibility in being a software engineer, either because we're building the artificial intelligence, or because we're trusted with data, or because we have privileges or not handicaps, however you want to call it. Do you think it's too much? And I'm already taking a tangent on the questions we agreed beforehand, but do you think we have too much responsibility, too much power, or too much responsibility too early as software engineers?
No.
You want to answer?
And no, in the sense of, I feel like as soon as one starts living, we have certain responsibilities. And then as we grow, there's more maybe. But I feel like this is a mistake that maybe a lot of people, when they start in their careers or start on a new role, they take the backseat or listening position too often. Whereas it's the moment where you can speak up, or maybe you see certain behaviors that could be questioned. So I feel like maybe then you have fresh eyes that allow you to see. So I think we can embrace this responsibility. Basically, maybe that's my main point. It's like we need to be aware of the responsibility that we have. And no matter, like, it's there, whether we see it or not.
It's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Philippe.
Sorry.
No,
I don't think neither we have too much, because too much would mean there's a risk or a danger, right? You can't say too much in the void. You have to compare it to something. Too much for the good of someone, too much for our own good, too much for the good of the world. Too much for our own good, I don't believe so. I've never seen anyone like crumble entirely under those responsibilities. And too much for the world, I don't think neither, because even though we have a lot of power, we have a lot of responsibilities, there are like other cases when younger people have had even more responsibilities with even less preparation, and it works. So is it a lot? Yes. Is it too much? I don't think so. More specifically, I was thinking of soldiers, medics, nurses, teachers, like teacher that are responsible for teaching the world of tomorrow. Like imagine that amount of responsibilities, and it's given to people of like 20 years old.
For me, the interesting thing about technology is also how it scales, or like the leverage it has. And I think this is where we might not realize how dangerous our work is, because like you're on your computer alone in your room and you're just like writing something, but then you don't realize how whatever you're doing can have an effect on like a massive amount of people. So for me, it's this one, we need to realize that can be making a difference in both directions.
It's indeed something that at least I don't think enough of, or that I don't think much of, because as you say, you're in front of your computer and at the end of the day, I'm just focused on, I just want to solve the next puzzle, right? And I don't think, okay, how is my solving of the next puzzle gonna affect person X or person Y? Which I think is a nice segue to my next, the next musing I wanted to pose to you both is, if you had to take or make an Hippocratic oath as a software engineer, what would it be? I mean, in other words, what do you think the prime directive as a software engineer should be?
All right, that is actually the only question that you sent us, and that had me thinking since you sent us the question. It's very difficult because software engineers do a lot of different stuff, but at the same time, so does doctors. So me personally, I think I would like vow something along the line of do not abuse trust. It's very vague, but also like there will be software engineers about doing weapons, doing bad things. It's industry, so it's very difficult to limit it. But me personally, it would work for me. It would have maybe prevented me of doing some mistakes. It also has guided me making very good choice in the past, like ensuring that I would not abuse trust. So that would be my attempt at such a vow.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it. What about you, Kalindi?
Actually, I read it and I was like, yes, absolutely. But then I realized I haven't really thought what I would what I would sign. It was just like I would sign something, and also I'm not entirely sure what the medical one has. But I think it, as you say, there's like it's a few lines of both respect and mission, probably like a mix
think
of.
The medical one is first, do no harm.
Yeah, can sign that. And I think there's an element also about like privacy towards your patient or your client or whoever you're building towards for. And I really like when you go to the toilet, right? And it says, leave it as you found it or better. And I feel like we should think about this also with the world or like any role we take. So that's maybe also.
That's role. I love it. I tell it to whomever is ready to hear it. Yeah, definitely. Leave the world a better place. Leave the camp a better place. Yeah, leave the software a better place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always heard it applied to code, and it's interesting to think also, okay, is what I'm doing leaving a better place outside of my code base, right? Because as you said before, it does affect outside of just, will the next person be able to code with what I'm making right now, right?
Yeah.
Am I taking the data? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because I know it's not the topic for today, but when building a career and making choices, because most software engineers will get offers from like tons of players, that's one of our privilege, right? We have a ton of offers and we need guidelines. And like when we are young. We have no guidelines. Of course, money is the main differentiator.
Mm.
But I think growing up, like having such an oath could help us, and thinking in terms of like what is the job which will protect me. So financial aspect is important, but what is the job that will allow me to make the world a better place becomes more and more important to more and more people when they grow up.
You make me think of another tangent. So this question, you did not have any of you the option to prepare it. But do you think that software engineering should be regulated in the professional sense, like professions are in the US? So I think if you're a lawyer or a doctor in the US, you have to take exams every X time, and you have an entity that will disbar you if you do not behave ethically, etc., etc. Or is it too fuzzy as a profession to be able to have that?
Okay. I'll go. Sorry. I've never asked myself that question. I think it's a very good question. I think I would be against preventing someone to do the profession just because they didn't pass the exam or because they didn't. There's a lot of reason why you might not be able to get the certificate. And I think it would be a shame to be prevented from doing the job just because you couldn't have a certification. But I also believe it might make sense, like a label, maybe something like ISO certified, but in a better way, saying, okay, like not only am I like a software engineer, but I'm also certified to know what is privacy, what is trust, like what is ethic. I know that typically psychologists, at least in Belgium, they have such a certification. Like it's not mandatory, but if you have it, it's like an extra stamp. And I typically know that if I had to find a psychologist, I would typically look for someone with the stamp.
Mm.
For me, I think it's one of my favorite things about software engineering, that the road to software engineering can be very different. And that was also one of the reasons why I was really passionate about online education, because it meant I was working in the, like, helping people learn programming. And it meant that people could really, like, basically elevate their families or their lives, both financially and the way, the kinds of opportunities they had. So for me, it feels like it would take away some of this if it was very too stiff. But of course, as an employer or you want signs of in which you can trust. But I think as engineers, we can sometimes show what we've built, which is something that a lot of other jobs don't necessarily have.
I was also thinking about the concept, like, for example, you are a software engineer that has worked on, let's say, the FTX, I think it was called, the bank, the kind of investment bank of crypto money that scammed a lot of people. Like an entity that would say, okay, you were a software engineer there, you knowingly scammed people, you're not allowed for X time to work as a software engineer. Those are that's what I meant with that, right? Like, should there be an entity that protects public of software engineers, knowing that we have a lot of power to affect lives outside of our own?
It feels so strange. Like, I understand the concept, but it feels off in some way, because like, why is it then not taken care of legally? Like, from maybe shouldn't then the law step in at some point? Or like, where is this entity and how it will work? But then maybe it's also like different people have different moral codes. And for me, it just makes it makes no sense to behave in certain ways. And maybe some people need more of a guideline, and maybe it would make sense in that way. Actually, one of my favorite articles the title is "Ethics Can't Be a Side Job," because I think a lot of the times, especially, like, we can do our day job that we can convince ourselves it's okay because like we need money, we need opportunities in career, whatever. And then in the free time, we can go and volunteer or something. But it's like, where do we have the most effect? It's at work. So yeah, but I'm really confused by this idea, even though like I know like a lot of professions do have these kind of boards and you need to have a license and all that. But I wonder if it, I mean, there's policies that are happening, especially like, for example, for AI within the European Union now. And so maybe that kind of can maybe embrace more policies about the technologies we're building and not how do people behave within them.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I like your answer, which is, if I understood correctly, the concept is intriguing, but it's way too weird and too restrictive to work, right?
Yeah.
Or I understood wrongly.
I think so. I feel like what I like about software engineering and technology kind of might go against, but I feel like when money becomes a niche, like I think even like Google had "Don't be evil" slogan, and then it disappeared at some point. So it's like, maybe we don't have enough internal drive anymore, and maybe now there should be an external framework to behave within when money becomes, and as you say, like with the rough market, when people and companies become more scared about their existing, like about their day-to-day life and ability to work, then of course you start to give in to things that maybe you wouldn't have. So maybe that's when we should have more guidelines or rules, but probably companies first and then humans second. Yeah. I got a thumbs up.
Okay. Yeah, you got a thumbs up, and I was nodding in agreement as well. Would you like to expand on that, Philippe, other than having an agreement with Kalindi?
Not much, but definitely that like it should be on the company or contractor side, like who really created the problem of like scam? Is it the person? Is it the organization behind? When you mentioned the ID, like my brain was already figuring out 1,000 ways to abuse that ID, and of course it's a rough idea, but like justice, because what you suggested, is creating a law, which means creating justice and legal definition. It's a very subtle thing, and it's very difficult to get it right. So, yeah, I would be against. I know that historically some people have been forbidden to use a computer, like very drastic events, like hackers, like very deep hackers. But if you look today, 90% of the hackers are employed by armies or legal entities. So yeah, I don't see how this would be a solution. It would probably be more of a problem than a solution.
Which, since I thought it, like since it just came to me, it's obviously not like a good solution is not gonna come up in a random conversation in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with, having heard your points, I agree that it would be more problematic than anything else. But taking it back to a person, sorry, Kalindi, you were gonna say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just that maybe here there's the question of responsibility comes back, which is given the fact that there are not as many laws in the tech world and licenses for maybe then this is where we need to look out for both each other, our friends, our community at work. Like we need to speak up when something shady starts happening, or if we are confused about a certain client or something. So it's like there are no rules necessarily, but it means that we need to maybe create what we think is right or wrong for ourselves, and then keep ourselves and each other accountable.
I love that you gave me a great segue to the next question I wanted to put forth, which was exactly bringing that back to the personal level. Have you ever had to choose between your principles and money or self-protection or self-preservation? If yes, when and are you willing to share it publicly? You can say no, obviously, to this.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I feel like my most recent job was a bit like this. I mean, it was still it was still very like a interesting project and still in a good realm. Like it was machine learning privacy, but it was in healthcare. And,
Mhm.
I mean, I accepted the job because it was a very interesting topic and the team was nice and the money was good and all these things. But I had set out to, like, I made this whole plan about what am I going to do next and how I'm going to dedicate myself to nature and so on. And then it's easy to get distracted when an opportunity comes. So I don't feel like I've harmed too much, but I know I myself, like it set me back from my goals or my responsibilities for certain amount of time.
Okay. And Philippe, you were gonna say something at exactly the same time as Kalindi. You have your
Yes,
chance now.
I think it happened like a lot actually because of all the opportunities we get. So, but solely on the topic of career building, I remember that probably the first time it happened to me was when I wasn't even having a job. I was studying, and I had to choose options, and choosing options means like choosing options, which options you don't get. I remember clearly not picking SAP, even though that was like the most paying option, like guaranteed job, high paying job at the end of the school, because I like my words at that time were like, I don't like that world. Today I can explain a bit better why I don't like that world or how I picture that world, because I still don't know very much that world, but it's still something I don't want to approach too much because I don't want to be tempted.
Mhm.
This is like also you have to know yourself. You have to know how strong you are, because sometimes when you approach like the flame, you might actually like run into it. And more recently, when I left the agency in which I was working for startups, a few of the former clients like knew I was quitting, so they offered me a job, and one of them was like very, very highly paid. It was like paid more than twice my salary, which was like quite good already. And it took me 2 weeks to refuse because of the money, and eventually their their product, their company is helping families manage their belongings, their legacy. In other words, their product is helping rich people to stay rich. And I strongly believe in inheritance tax. I believe like inheritance tax is probably the only mechanism helping to to like slow down the concentration of wealth. So eventually I was like, yeah, it could pay my apartment in 1 or 2 years. It could make my life much more comfortable. But also like, what am I gonna say to my niece and nephew? Because I don't have kids. Like, how am I gonna look myself in the mirror? Like, so yeah. So it's very difficult. It's very tempting. And I do believe that probably every dev has has a similar choice at some point in their life. Could be early, could be late, but there are so many offers and there's so much money going around that eventually you will get an offer for like weapons, pornography, gambling, all those very difficult industries. And I'm not saying that any of these industry is in itself wrong. I'm saying that each of these industry could like raise questions and could raise temptation and could be triggering some things to some people.
Mm.
I really liked your mention of flame or temptation, or for me, it's also like the sliding, like once you start sliding with your convictions, it's easy to slide further down. And for me also, I think it's really important about day-to-day work, because I think these big moments kind of maybe are more stuck in the memory, but there's also like a lot of moments where like a project is presented, or even the way people behave to each other in a team, right? Maybe it's a moment where we should stand up for someone or for something, or against someone. And then we might not, because of self-preservation, or, oh, I just don't want to deal with it now. But then I think, so I think there's the big choices that we have to make, but then there's also like the micro choices every day where
Yeah,
that also,
I definitely agree. And yeah, also when you mentioned like solving the next puzzle, you said that at the beginning of the talk. For me, this is like dopamine boost, and it's easy to get lost in like, it's exciting. And even fixing a bug, it's exciting. Like you're battling a bug for a whole day, maybe like 2 days, 1 week, then you win. It's awesome. Like it's super rewarding. It's easy to blind yourself about other issues when you get such a boost, such an emotional boost of dopamine. It's something I'm very aware, because I've stopped writing code. Like now I'm coaching a team and helping other people progress. So I actually had to give up that dopamine boost, and I'm missing it a lot. But also now my daily job is about those like larger problems, and I can see how I couldn't see them before.
What advice, since you have been able to take a step back in that, and now you see them from above, what advice would you have for me, who I am stuck into the dopamine boost loop, if you want to call it that, to take a step back while still coding, to see those problems more easily?
I don't think we do have the time, but there's actions there's a pyramid, which is a very interesting one. I forgot the name, but there's your actions, which means your behavior, like your actions together they form your behavior, which comes from your principles and your values, and eventually, and there's your mission, and then identity. I might like get a bit confused about that pyramid, but look at yourself. Try to know who you are. It's a tough challenge. It's never ending. But the more you ask the question why, there's never enough of why. So ask yourself why you do that, why you like it, why does it matter, why, and then eventually you will discover who you are, or you will decide who you are. That's like two different approach of this. I'm a believer that you decide who you are, but eventually it's the same. Once you know who you are, then the more important challenges, like you still have the dopamine boost from the puzzle, but you will also end your year asking yourself, what did I achieve this year? Like, how did I progress to my mission? Like, if you have a mission, things get much more easily, because you can frequently ask yourself, like, am I progressing in my personal mission? And if you're not, then all those puzzles you've solved, they will just be like junk food, like it was nice, but it prevented you from reaching something more important, which you really want, you strongly want to achieve. So like that flame is much further, but it's so much brighter than maybe you can forget about the close ones.
I like this, because you basically mentioned the responsibility we have to ourselves and our lives to lead a good life, or whatever is a good life for us. I guess for me, it's also interesting how at work we have retros or planning sessions. So I'm a big fan of that professionally, but also like privately. I think it's really nice to stop sometimes and just review with obvious questions what's going on. But I wrote it down on my notes, why, and I will ask myself this more. So I think it's such a like thing that toddlers do, but it would work so much. Like we would be much better if we do it too.
I agree. And we're gonna enter the last phase of the podcast, which I'm thinking it's gonna be a long one, but we talked a lot about how what we do impacts everyone around us or the society at large, and we agreed that that society is quite diverse. How could we better reflect that diversity in the teams we build as software developers, in the teams we're in, either as the creators of the teams or participants? Kalindi, if you wanna take us away.
Yeah. So there's this story. I don't know why I thought the question was gonna go on for longer, and I was just deep in my thoughts and walking out of it. But this is like some topic that is I'm super passionate about, because I feel, as I mentioned before, we're alone on our computer, or we have our like few people around us that are generally quite similar to us, especially in terms of like life opportunities. And so we forget what the world is like outside. Even things like my uncle, if there's a password to an app, it doesn't exist. And he's on the computer all day long, like watching YouTube videos. But if he needs to put the password anywhere, he's done. So it's even somewhere so close, like people have such different ways to access technology, both in terms of, and then there's even like the actual practical difficulties of not having much data or not having access to tools. One of my favorite stories is I went to a talk and the speaker showed a graph of phone usage, and it was like, okay, like a little bit of phone users and then like a big boost after in the evening. And then she was like, okay, why is there this big boost in the evening? And I think it was in one of the African countries. And then everyone was like, oh yeah, because people come home and are on their phones now. But it was actually because the parents would come home with their phones and then the kids would use them to do homework. So for me, this was like we forget that the world is big. And so and even we forget who our clients are sometimes. So I think it's this like step out of our little rooms and think about the world is my, first point.
I didn't know that anecdote, and I think it's super illustrative because we are working with quote unquote the best internet available, and our pages load super quick, and everyone has a phone and whatever, put all the ands you want there. But not everyone uses it that way. Not everyone has access to the same connections, etc., etc., etc. And the like I guess the same as you said you guessed during the conference. Yeah, work ends, so people go on the phones. I don't know, work ends, so people get access to the phone because it's the kids, and there is one phone per family. It's illuminating.
Yeah.
All right, my turn. I don't have that much experience. I know that for a long time I've been worried about the parity between like sex in STEM in general, not only in computer science. I typically I like, but it's very emotional. It's not rational, but I like initiatives like Rails Girls and stuff that specifically targets that problem. But on the more general topic of diversity, again, I would ask why. And if you ask enough why, you will probably get ideas about what to do in order to solve specifically why there is a problem with the lack of diversity. Because typically, like for startups, they cannot afford diversity immediately. So I know this is a very strange thing to say, but I believe that if people that recruit people that looks like them, because they will get faster. Like the faster you can go is being alone. Like the speed of your thoughts, it goes very fast. But at some point you can do enough alone. So you will need to recruit, you will need to expand the team. And you will typically recruit people who are very much like you, because even though it's not as fast as being alone, the more they are like you, the faster you will go. Which is probably needed for survival. But if you take a wrong turn, if you take a wrong direction, you will also go very fast in the wall. So I think at some point, and it's quite interesting because I think it's the size of my company right now, it is important to do something very unnatural, is like recruiting people who are not like you. And it means slow down. It means like take more time, explain, ask, like having to answer more questions. But among those questions, there are also questions like why, and those are good questions. So maybe you need to slow down. Maybe it was a good idea. So first of all, I would recommend that you try to understand why it is important to have diversity, because there are a lot of different reasons, but you probably need to understand which matters to you. And then once you know why, I think you can approach that by exposing yourself. So like meeting people, talking with people. I know that one of my most eye-opening experience in diversity was working as a student as a cashier in a grocery store. And gosh, like people were so different, because all my life I had been around people like from my neighborhood, like my school, or like my group, my cognitive group, my cultural group, my religion. But when you walk in a grocery store, you're like, oh, now there's everybody, because everybody needs to eat. So everybody like do groceries. And I do believe that putting yourself deliberately in groups, well, that are not your groups, your natural groups, like deliberately thinking of a place where you could go, and it's not just a natural place for your similar peers, it will naturally open your mind, and it will change the way you think, and it will help you see the unseen, because most of the problem of diversity is because it's an invisible problem. Like you don't even know what you're missing by not having a diverse group.
I like this point about you don't know what you're missing, because we just like every life is complete in the sense of like you eat, you sleep, you do whatever you do. And I think you mentioned also that if you don't have the diversity in it, you can go in the wrong direction and then hit the wall. But I just want to say that you don't also sometimes hit the wall. You just keep going in the wrong direction. And I think you mentioned it might be faster, but it's also because maybe someone doesn't ask you the difficult questions, or people don't they don't give you if you're building a product for someone, if you just build for one section of society, of course you're gonna build it faster, because you don't you don't take into account actually the whole, like a wider range of society. And
yeah, I think when a company starts, it needs to reach a certain speed, and it doesn't even matter the direction, because if you don't reach that speed, you will not survive. So that is the reason why most startups, like they are very close friends, for example, because they know each other very well. But as soon as you reach like survival speed, then the direction matters. So this like actually quite soon in the adventure, you need to get a bit more diversity, because you need to be able to turn the steering wheel. Like maybe initially you don't even need to steer because you need the speed, but very soon you need at least a little bit of option.
I think you mentioned, I liked your story about the cashier, because it's basically you're putting the diversity before even starting the company, right? Because if your group of friends with which you're starting the company is diverse, then you're already done one step towards having a better representation. So maybe like if I go back to the topic of responsibility, right? It's our responsibility to try to assemble a team around us in our lives that would then, if we start a company, be a diverse team. Because
absolutely. And I've heard someone, I can't remember whom, who recommended that if you use Twitter or Facebook, LinkedIn, if you get some like mechanical way of getting news from the world, you can deliberately decide whose voice you listen to. You can mute some voice, you can like tune up some voices, some strange voices, maybe like just for an experiment for a few months, but you can design that. You can deliberately spend 1 hour and decide whose voice you can be influenced by, whose tweets you're going to read, whose message you're going to read. And I thought it was like a super interesting idea to not just let the algorithm decide what you get exposed to, but deliberately pick what you get exposed to.
I, I, I keep thinking about this concession that you gave to small, like to starting companies, because I feel like I think it's the same as being scared for your career, right? If you like with this, oh, it's okay, I'm just going to do this for a bit in terms of like to start my career, to get it up to speed, right? Whereas I think also companies, we should build them on good foundations right out from the start. And of course, like where is it just an excuse, and where is it really a necessity? Because I think like also for our careers, like sometimes we might accept something, but it's, our careers might have worked out also if we accepted the other thing that didn't seem so obvious. And so for me, it's also interesting because there's lots of organizations that take a different route to grow, right? They don't necessarily take investments or which means that then they can retain some kind of freedom of thought when they don't need to.
But it also means they have to eat whatever they can scrap. I've seen like typically a freelancer or people like just learning how to program just because they had that idea of something they could start. And initially, like whatever they find, whomever they find, they will get it, because it's so difficult to find people that they won't look at the teeth. So that's the concession I was giving to the startups. Like when you're fighting to survive and you're eating whatever you can scrap, it's too early to think of like tomorrow's problem. And I think like having a diverse group is not something you need to design initially when you're just fighting to survive. Of course, as soon as you get choices, it becomes important. But in my experience, again, with the startups I've worked with, they had no freedom at all. Sometimes they even like use their friends to start the company, even though one of the friends like shouldn't be in the company, but he was there.
I I I find interesting the idea that companies have some type of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that before thinking about quote unquote higher thoughts, they need to be able to eat, sleep, have a roof, and then they can, companies as a concept can self-actualize. But I do agree with Kalindi in some sense that the risk of saying, okay, I'm just going to do this to survive, is when do you say to yourself, okay, now I'm surviving.
Absolutely. There's a lot of
I
bad
need to
things.
start getting out of my comfort zone, because you could always tell yourself, yeah, but if I just go that bit faster,
Yeah,
then I'm fine, right? And that line is, it's, even if like not being diverse at the beginning should at least be a conscious choice, not just yeah, it's easier, right?
absolutely. I agree. And the risk you've identified is a real risk. Like some company become really, really big without ever questioning that aspect.
I wonder if a company that actually that maybe makes some concessions like this early on has like maybe one accepts. So I think it's really important to create like the values of a company once you start out. And like I started a startup with some friends a few years ago, and basically you sit down. Of course, like when there's not many of you, chances are, as you say, that you're more similar to each other than not. But you can sit down and think about where you want your company to grow towards, right? And I think that's the moment where you create this the values of the company, in which being a good servant or service to the world maybe comes in as well. And then every few months or whenever one has this reflection period of a potentially like a higher level retrospective, then these values can remind us that maybe actually we were talking that we're gonna try to find a more representative group to our society. And then like, that's a moment that, but I think it has to be probably inbuilt at the beginning as well.
Mm.
But because
I think you're right. I think you're right. And also in a bit of a paradoxical way, I do believe that having values, having principles will also help attract talents. Because if the only thing you can offer to the talents is like, we pay your wages, then you can't fight every other offer. Like, actually, small companies, they have to offer something different, not more, but different. And at that point, your values, your diversity, your principles matters a lot.
There's actually one concept I've met a few times with when I talk to other women, and there's this the point of being the difficulty of being the first woman on a team. So, and especially it depends, like some people are more comfortable than others at this, but it's so basically being the first representative of a diverse thing. So especially when you mention this, like a small company starting out, everyone's similar. How do you make space and create opportunities for both to join a company, but also then to thrive within a company for that first person? And I think this is where, as you say, like the values really are important and what you can offer. Yeah.
I think we can end the podcast here in this really interesting final reflection. Kalindi, thank you both very much for having participated and giving us an hour of really, really, really interesting points. I'm sure a lot of people will want to chip in. They can't because you were the only ones present, but I learned a lot. Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share and think about these topics.
It was a pleasure. Thank you both.